This meeting is being recorded.
Good afternoon and good evening, everyone. As our guests make their way into the event, we will begin with a musical welcome from the Mariachi Teachers Band of the Bakersfield City School District Migrant Education Program. Please enjoy the music.
Ay, 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 for having us at the Jess Neto Memorial Conference. We have Jamie Flores in the Migrant Education Program. I'd like to thank you once again. I would like to now introduce Dr. Taina Caragón, Curator of Latino Art and History at the Smithsonian Institution, and Dolores Huerta.
Hello, everyone. Good evening
Hello.
and good afternoon. My name is Ronnie Rest, and I teach art history at Bakersfield College and also co-direct the Wylie and May Louise Jones Gallery, which is proudly hosting the Smithsonian Traveling Exhibition, Dolores Huerta, Revolution in the Fields, Revolución en los Campos. It is a great honor to introduce our guest this evening, an amazing woman whose life's work and activism this exhibition is based on, Miss Dolores Huerta. And she will be in conversation with the Smithsonian Institution's Curator of Latino Art and History for the National Portrait Gallery, Dr. Taina Caragón. I need to take one moment to recognize the outstanding group of people that have made all of this possible. This has been an amazing community effort. Jeff Houston, the Jones Gallery's co-director, and everyone in the art department. Oliver Rosales deserves the credit for spearheading the exhibition coming to Bakersfield. Andrew Bond, who is behind the scenes here and has been instrumental in this week's Jess Nieto Memorial Conference. Bakersfield College's president, Sonia Christian. The Bakersfield College Office of Student Success and Equity. BC Student Government Association. Jack Hernandez, Reggie Williams of the Levin Center for the Humanities. The Arts Council of Kern County and the BC Foundation, specifically the Finlayson Endowment, whose contributions helped fund what became a virtual gallery tour, which is now live and we'll share the link to shortly. I also must thank Maria del Carmen Cosu, the project director for Latino initiatives at the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service, and the entire sites team at the Smithsonian have been a dream to work with over this past year. Also, Lori De Leon and everyone at the Dolores Huerta Foundation who have dedicated their time and energy to be sure this exhibit is as impactful as possible in Dolores's hometown. And can we recognize that this is Women's History Month as well as National Farm Worker Awareness Week? Si se puede. Please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and time allowing, we will get to as many questions as possible. Thank you again. And I now hand off the mic to Ms. Maria del Carmen Cosu from the Smithsonian.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon to all. This is a very special moment because we're here with Dolores Huerta to be able to tell the story of her commitment to farm workers and to many, many causes. And Taina and Ronnie, many thanks for allowing me to acknowledge some of our partners in this important project today. I would like to acknowledge first that this afternoon I'm speaking to you from the Washington, D.C. area where the Smithsonian Institution is located on the native lands of the Piscataway, the Pamunkey, the Noncochatank, and their descendants. Our respect and gratitude to them for the opportunity to work in this land. Dolores Huerta, Revolution in the Fields, Revolución en los Campos, is organized by the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service in collaboration with the National Portrait Gallery. This exhibition received federal funding and support from the Latino Initiatives Pool administered by the Latino Center, the Smithsonian Latino Center. A special thanks to our host, the wonderful team at Bakersfield College and Jones Art Gallery that made this exhibition and the virtual tour possible. I'm grateful to my partners at Bakersfield College, Oliver Rosales, Ronnie Rest, Jeffrey Houston, Andrew Bond, Monica Smith, and Leah Pendres, and all the staff, faculty, and students who made this public program possible today. Special supporters are the Bakersfield College Office of Student Success and Equity and the Art Council of Kern, Bakersfield College Student Government Office Association, and Bakersfield College Finlayson Endowment. The exhibition has been made possible thanks to these contributions and support. And most important, I am thankful to Dolores Huerta herself for her trust in having us be able to tell her story, to her daughters who shared their stories, their personal photographs with us. Special thanks to my friend, hermana Lori de Leon, to Juanita Chavez, Camila Chavez, and Alicia Huerta. Thank you, Dolores. Muchas gracias. At the Smithsonian, we thank our leadership. Kim Sajet, Director, National Portrait Gallery. Eduardo Diaz, Director of the Smithsonian Latino Center. Diana Bosa Bastidas, Manager of the Latino Initiatives Pool Grant. And also at the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Service, our Director, Miriam Springle, and all the exhibition teams that made it possible. We are humbled and honored to be able to tell Dolores' critical American story. And we are very, very grateful to Bakersfield College for supporting us in developing these amazing virtual tour and programs to overcome the challenges of this pandemic. So thank you, Bakersfield College and the team. And now I would like to introduce my friend, Taina Caragol, Curator of Latino Art and History at the National Portrait Gallery, and Dolores Huerta. Thank you so much for your passion and contribution. Thank you, Dolores. Thank you, Taina.
I want to thank you, Maria, for all of the hard work that you have done in this traveling exhibition. As we know, it's been in several states now, and now it is kind of close to home here in Bakersfield, where all of this history was made. And you and Taina have just been incredible in doing all of this work. And I know that you were here in Bakersfield in person, and it's just sad that, you know, we have to, the pandemic is keeping us all separated right now, and we just can't all be together. But again, I cannot thank you enough for all the work that you've done to make this possible.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. And
let
thank
you
you,
start.
Maria. It's really an absolute pleasure to be here this afternoon with you. Thank you to all of those who are joining this program. Also, my thanks to Bakersfield College, to the Huerta family. Very, very special thanks to Dolores, to Barbara Carrasco, who was a very important connector at the beginning of this project, and also to Nora Dominguez, who's also a great friend of the project. This program is really special because of a number of reasons. For one, it's in Bakersfield College. It's in your hometown, Dolores, and that already makes it hugely special. Each venue that has received this traveling exhibition has been very welcoming, very warm. But I have to say there have been some that have been especially dear because of the important part they have played in the story, as you just said. It's also a special program because it's at Bakersfield College, and you have a very special connection to youth, as someone who has advocated for youth, who started her life path as an organizer young in life, and who also trains youth to become engaged in our civic society. And finally, it's also special because it's National Farm Worker Awareness Week, and you have dedicated your life to that cause. So it's incredibly meaningful to be here today with you. And I would love to, with your help, share a little bit about the exhibition, how it started, and do one of my favorite things every time we open one of these traveling shows, which is seeing Dolores give the tour herself, you know, showing some of the images that are in the show, and seeing and listening to her sharing anecdotes and bringing all the stories to life. So that's what we're going to do today. But before all of that, I want to ask you, Dolores, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well, thank you. Like everybody else with this pandemic, just waiting to bust out and get out there. And again, it's so sad that, you know, we have to be locked down. Although Kern County is going to be opening up this week somewhat, because it's been one of the places where we've had the most deaths and the most illnesses from COVID-19. So, and I don't know how long the exhibit is going to be at Bakersfield College, because so many of the folks that are going to be with us today, their parents or the grandparents were involved in the farm worker movement. I'm sure many of them were on marches and strikes, and boycotts and many of the things that the farm workers movement was about. So in many ways, a lot of this will be very personal to them. And maybe they will see things that they really didn't know, but maybe they just heard somebody talk about them, but didn't actually get to see them themselves.
Right. This will be a very relevant story. And I saw some photographs of you getting your vaccine.
Yes.
You're vaccinated. How did that feel? Why did you make it a public, a public statement?
Well, I wanted to make it a public statement because there are some people that might be wary about getting their vaccine. And since I'm going to be 91 years old in a couple of weeks, I thought it would kind of be an inspiration to people so they won't be hesitant about getting their vaccine. So, and by the way, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we have been doing vaccine clinics ourselves in a couple of different areas. So, we just want to let people know that ahora es cuando, now's the time that you have to get your vaccine, not only for yourself, but for your family and for the community and for our whole country. Basically, we could say that because we want to get that herd immunity, but we can't get it unless everybody gets a vaccine.
Absolutely. That's amazing to hear that the foundation itself has been doing vaccine clinics. How amazing. You are always doing amazing work. And I have a PowerPoint to share. So I'm going to share that screen right now so that we can start talking about the exhibition. Dolores Huerta, Revolution in the Fields, Revolución en los Campos, is an exhibition that really came out of an original show organized at the National Portrait Gallery in 2015. This was an exhibition in conjunction with the 50th anniversary of the Delano grape strike that launched the farm workers movement. And so the National Portrait Gallery is a museum in Washington, D.C. It's one of the 19 museums of the Smithsonian, and it's where I work, where I am curator of painting and sculpture and of Latino or Latinx art and history. And it's a museum of biography and portraiture. It's a museum that tells the story of the United States through portraits of people who have made contributions of national impact. And very often we think about historical anniversaries as occasions to mark and to revisit through exhibitions. And so we knew in 2013, when I started my job, that the 50th anniversary of the beginning of the farm workers movement was coming up. And I remember our director, Kim Sayed, asking me, well, what kind of exhibition would you do? And so I had heard the name Dolores Huerta in conjunction to Cesar Chavez. And I thought to myself, you know what? Before answering that question, let me do some research, because there's this name I've heard a lot, but I don't know enough. However, I have a hunch that this woman, who is an important public figure now, was also very significant in the farm workers movement. And I want to learn more about her to see if we can do a show about her. And so I went to Wayne State University in Detroit, where the Walter P. Reuther Library of Labor Archives is located. They have an impressive amount of materials and archival materials on labor unions. And one of those collections is the UFW collection, the collection of the United Farm Workers papers. And so I started doing my research there, and I came upon an abundance of documents, photographs, letters that signaled that Dolores Huerta had been a crucial figure in the farm workers movement, and that an exhibition on her was really overdue. That this was a woman that needed to be known by everyone in the country, that her contribution had to be registered by everyone, and that, in the words of Cesar Chavez himself, she was co-architect of the farm workers movement. And so she deserved the credit, and her story deserved to be explored. Dolores was, founded the National Farm Workers Association, which was the union that, together with the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, which was a Filipino union, merged and formed the United Farm Workers. And when the United Farm Workers was founded, she had very important roles in its leadership. She was its vice president and also had a very multifaceted role as a picket captain, as contract negotiator, as a lobbyist, as a main communicator. She basically did it all. And she also did that while having her own family. And so this was a story that we decided to explore and that took the shape of this exhibition, One Life, Dolores Huerta, which was on view for almost a year. It was the first exhibition of the series that we do, titled One Life, that we dedicate to one historical figure and where we delve into their life history and their contribution to the country. And this was the first of those shows that we dedicated to Latina, to any Latino historical figure, by that matter. And the first one also to be dedicated to a living figure. All of the previous ones had been people who had been deceased already. And so it was incredibly powerful to have Dolores be at the opening, participate in the press conference where she spoke to. That was the first time I was blown away, because she spoke for like 4 hours straight to journalists, and she was still very sharp, by the end of the third, fourth hour. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And then that exhibition was transformed very much through the efforts of Maria del Carmen Cosu into a traveling exhibition that has toured the country. And that process of transformation, I should say, required research, required us visiting Bakersfield a few more times, visiting the foundation, seeing firsthand the work that Dolores does and also the foundation. Something that was very special about this project is that, this was very important to Dolores from the beginning, that this history not be seen as something from the past, but as a current phenomenon, as the seed of a continuum of social struggle. And so she took us to the fields in Lamont, we're very close to where you all are right now, right? In all of those who are joining us from Bakersfield. She took us to her foundation to see how she engaged with youth who were learning how to register voters. And we saw the very practical dimension of her organizing work, of her legacy, basically how it's done and why it matters and who it affects, who it impacts. And so this was the exhibition that we did at the Portrait Gallery was transformed into these graphic panels that allow us to share it with many more audiences across the country, sometimes in very often solving the problem of documents or artworks that cannot travel for extended periods of time because there are conservation issues they belong in archives where researchers need to have access to them. But through these freestanding graphic panels, we were able to recreate that narrative, to even expand it, including other themes that include the participation of Filipinos in the farm workers movement, that include the impact of the impact of the farm workers movement in environmental issues, for example, the impact of the arts in the movement, the role they played. And that has been the show that is traveling and that is right now at Bakersfield College. And we're absolutely happy that it's there. And we're very grateful for the virtual tour that has been created, which I hope you will be able to, all will be able to enjoy. And so to get to some of the images of the show, Dolores, I wanted to ask you about these two photographs because I've often heard you say that the two people with whom you're standing in these photographs are really fun, have been fundamental in your life and in leading you to a path of social, of community organizing. Can you speak about that?
Oh, yes, yes, of course. The photo of myself as a young child and my mother, who was there standing there with me. Of course, she was very influential because she was very active in the community. She was a businesswoman, and she kind of gave us the philosophy that we had an obligation to help people. And even if they did not ask for help, if there was anything that you could do to help somebody, that you had to do it. And also not to expect recognition or any kind of gratification, any kind of a reward. But that was something that we had to do as human beings. And also, she was also pushing me to be out in the public eye because I really was a rather shy. I don't know if that picture makes me look very shy, but I was a very shy child. But she kept making sure that I was out there doing things in public. I took dancing lessons and played the violin as a child, and so my mother, I guess, I don't think that she even knew what she was preparing me for. And on the other picture, of course, is Mr. Fred Ross, and he is the one that taught me how to do grassroots organizing, and he also taught Cesar Chavez and a lot of other organizers throughout that are active throughout the United States of America. He was a very great teacher, and I might say a very strict teacher in the way that he taught us how to do house meetings. To go into people's homes, to have meetings, to get them to remove their fears, because that is what, when we started organizing farm workers, there was a lot of fear because workers felt that if they got involved in anything that their bosses did not like, that they wouldn't be able to work, that they would fire them, that they would be blacklisted. And so Fred Ross was definitely one of my mentors. And of course, Cesar Chavez also, I learned a lot from Cesar himself. And also, I want to mention one other person that we don't see often in these pictures, and that is Helen Chavez, Cesar Chavez's wife, who was a very strong woman. And, we learned a lot from Helen also.
Dolores, can you talk a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing, how your mother raised you, if she had a parenting philosophy, how you had two siblings, both of them boys, and so I wonder what was the sort of the gender dynamic in your house, and how was it to grow up in Stockton with your mother who was divorced, right?
Yes. Well, yes, as a single parent, my mother, she was gone a lot because she actually worked two jobs. She would work by day as a waitress in a restaurant and by night in a cannery. And she was working two jobs because she wanted to save enough money to start her own business, which she eventually did. So at home, we were pretty much often had somebody taking care of us, my grandfather or an aunt or somebody, but we had to do all the housework. And so we had to wash the dishes and sweep the floors, make sure we had made up our own beds, etc. But my two brothers had to do the equal amount of work that I did. And my mother would have a chart up there with our names on it, and we had to go out there. And if it was your turn to wash the dishes this week, then you had to put your little check in there that you washed the dishes. But she was definitely an equal opportunity mother to make sure that the boys in the family did the same kind of work that I had to do. In fact, my brothers always say that I was spoiled, that they did more work than they did. And so both of my brothers, we all washed our own clothes. We ironed our own clothes. I was never asked by my mother to do anything for my brothers. They had to do whatever they needed. They had to take care of themselves.
And you think that had an impact later on in your life as you were raising your children too? And
Absolutely. Yes.
um, and tell me more about Fred Ross and particularly about the community service organization. How did you come into contact with them? And also, can you tell us about your role there as a lobbyist and how you learned this, how you became trained in a skill that was new and at which you were excellent?
Well, thank you. Well, yes, well, Mr. Ross taught us how to do house meetings, and we still do that method of organizing with the Dolores Huerta Foundation. But of course, right now we can't because we're kind of locked down. So our meetings have to be virtual. But basically, the way you do house meetings is you just meet in people's living rooms. You talk about the issues. You show people ways that they can solve the issues, but that they have to make a commitment. And then we have to get them to commit that they will also join. And the main thing that we say to people is, all of these problems that we have right now that you are living, they're not going to be solved unless you do it. You can't wait for somebody to come and do it for you. But the way that we can, meet these challenges is to come together as a group, because one person can't do it by themselves. We've got to come together and we've got to take direct action. And this is that we are able to. And then Fred Ross would show us pictures of what they did in Los Angeles, bringing in street lights and sidewalks and clinics into East Los Angeles, the Mexican-American areas, and by registering people to vote, and the politicians finally paid attention to them. And the one thing I just want to share with the students that are here today, the one thing that I did learn in all of the work that I've done is that there's always somebody out there that will help you. When Cesar asked me to be the lobbyist, for the community service organization. So I went to Sacramento. I met with some of the legislators, some of the people in Sacramento, and I asked them, how do you pass a bill? How do you make something into a law? And they explained it to me. So everything that I did, I just asked somebody out there that was doing the work to tell me how they did it. And that's how I learned. So you kind of learn by doing. And the same thing with negotiating contracts. When I was put in charge of negotiating the contracts, then I talked to some of the labor leaders that I knew. And then I asked them, how do you negotiate contracts? And they explained it to me. And then they gave me copies of different contracts. I collected them, and then I wrote up our own contract for the farm workers. So yeah, I think this is the greatest thing I think about both the community service organization. And by the way, we had a chapter here of CSO in Bakersfield for many, many years. And the United Farm Workers is we created a lot of leadership, and people learn by doing, as they do in our foundation today. They learn by doing the work.
That's wonderful. I really love this picture because of the messages around the two of you, and particularly that now is the time in front of you two in that podium. It makes the photograph very poignant. Okay, and so you joined the community service organization. You were a lobbyist with them for several years. You achieved some very important initiatives there that perhaps you can tell us about, such as the bilingual driver's tests, right?
Yes, how we were able to get not only did we able to get the driver's license in Spanish, but in CSO, we also got the voting ballots in Spanish. And I think maybe except for New Mexico, which in that state of New Mexico, everything has to be bilingual by law, as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that was signed when they took all of those lands from Mexico, and including California. But we were able to pass a law that all of our voting ballots had to be in Spanish, and also that all of the people could get their driver's license in Spanish. That was very important to people because many people couldn't pass their driver's test because they didn't understand the English.
But at some point, yet you and Cesar Chavez decided to branch out from the community service organization, right? And to dedicate yourselves to organizing farm workers.
Yes, because we thought that the CSOs, it was called, would support us to organize farm workers. But when we had the convention where they were going to vote to do, they were going to try to do a pilot project under the CSO, but the delegates voted against it. And one of the reasons that they voted against it is because many of the leaders in the community service organization were labor leaders, and they felt that if we tried to organize farm workers, it would be what they call dual unionism, and so they voted it down. And so Cesar and I both left the CSO, and we started the United Farm Workers.
Here we have some images that depict the terrible working conditions that the farm workers struggled with in the early 1960s. Can you tell us about what were the issues that you were organizing for?
Well, we can see right there that this gentleman is out there in the field, and there is no porta potty out there for him. There's no toilet out there for him. And this was devastating, especially to the women, because the women, they would have to make a circle. If somebody had to go to the bathroom, they would have to use towels or sheets, and there's, they wouldn't provide them with drinking water or relief periods. And so they were treated like animals, not like human beings. I think that was one of the grievances that they had. They had to work long hours for very low pay. And then you have this other picture here about how they're spraying. They would spray the workers with pesticides. And by the way, some of that still happens today. A couple of years ago, we had a lot of farm workers right here in Bakersfield that were sprayed with a combination, a cocktail of different pesticides. So that is one of the things that still needs to be corrected. We were able to pass laws in California that they have to they have to register when they're going to use some of these restricted pesticides, so that people can have access to the information, that they have to post the fields. But there's a lot of violations, and there are more laws that have been presented again to make it safer for farm workers. But eventually we have to take the whole issue of economic poisons, which is what the pesticides are, take it out of agriculture, take it out of the EPA, and put it under the Health and Human Services department of our government, because these are economic poisons that are being put on our food. And we have the highest cancer rate in the United States of any other country. And that is, of course, due to all of the poisons that are put on our food.
So it's really, it's a terrible issue affecting farm workers, but it also affects a broader population.
Yeah, the consumers, right? The consumers that eat the food that have the poisons on them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so these were the issues for which you were organizing, and together with Cesar Chavez, you founded the National Farm Workers Association in 1962. Mm-hmm. Here we see you signing up members at the inaugural convention.
And the reason that we called ourselves an association is because we didn't want the growers to know what we were doing, because we knew that they would try to squash us right away. So we called ourselves National Farm Workers Association, and that way they wouldn't know that we were forming a union.
That's really interesting. And so it was in order to not scare or not raise any flags among the growers, but was there also some trepidation, perhaps some hesitation from the farm workers themselves in fear of retaliation joining a union?
Oh yes, the fear was intense because they knew that they would get fired if they knew that they were trying to organize a union. And of course, we knew later that there was also a lot of violence and brutality associated with that. So we tried to keep it undercover pretty much when we started our, and we organized for 3 years. We started organizing in 1962. And the grape strike didn't start until 1965. So the picture that you're seeing here is actually our inaugural convention. And we had delegates from different parts of the San Joaquin Valley. We had people from Stockton, California, from Fresno, from Tulare. We had people from the coast, also from Watsonville and other areas. So they represented a large group of farm worker committees that we had organized.
That's amazing to think about the different, the different branches, the different, about the network that you create. before social media, right?
Mhm.
When you have to do it, when you have to do it by foot. Um, this is a photograph of the peregrinación, of the march from Delano to Sacramento in 1966. Can you tell us about that moment?
Well, we had been on strike for several months. And at the beginning, people were bringing us food, they were bringing us clothes, they were donating money to keep the strike going. And kind of people started, kind of forgetting about us, because this march started in March, I believe. In fact, I think it was on St. Patrick's Day, just during this period of time and during Lent. And so we thought, what should we do? So we came up with the idea of having a march. And Cesar Chavez and myself had read a lot about Gandhi. In fact, when I met Cesar, I was surprised that he had studied so much about Mahatma Gandhi, as I had also when I was in college. And so we thought, well, let's do a march. This is what Gandhi used to do these big marches. So we started, they started this march from Delano to Sacramento. And the thing about this march is that they didn't go down the main thoroughfares. They went through all of the back roads. They went through all of the farm worker towns, because at the same time, basically the message was to let farm workers know and let the public know that we were organizing. And so we did our march to the state capitol, to Sacramento, California, and we arrived there on Easter Sunday. So it was like during this period of time that we're living right now that this march took place. And the other great thing I want to mention about this march is when they left Delano, California, I think there were like 70 strikers that did the march. When they got to Sacramento, there were 10,000 people. So I like to say that to folks, that sometimes you think, oh, we're a small number, we really can't make this happen. And I like to share this with people, that when we started the union, there were only 3 of us. It was Cesar Chavez, his wife Helen, and myself, just the 3 of us. So, and so we should never hesitate to say, I can't do it, because whatever it is that I want to do for social justice, because I'm just one person. No, just find somebody else to help you.
And so there are many dimensions to talk about the movement, right? One of them that I would love to hear you elaborate on is the collaboration between Mexicans and Mexican Americans and Filipino farm workers. And then after that, I would love to hear you speak also about how the movement took on nationally, really, and what it meant to have the support of Senator Bobby Kennedy, for example.
Yeah, that was so important. Well, as you said before, that United Farmers Organizing Committee, which I had initially been part of that organization, but I left. And the reason that I left is because they started working with labor contractors and deducting money from people's paychecks, even though they hadn't really gotten any benefits yet. And so that's when I left the UFWOC, and that's when Cesar and I decided it's time to start our own union, right? And so, and of course, Larry Idong stayed behind and became the head of that, pretty much the leader of that organization. But this picture here, it shows that we've already combined, because then it became United Farm Workers Organizing Committee, as you said before. So the Filipino brothers and the Mexican workers were all working together at that point in time. And of course, this is one great picture when Senator Kennedy came to Delano, California. And we didn't know this at the time, but Senator Kennedy had already decided that he was going to run for the presidency, but he had not made it public. But at the end of this rally, and there were thousands of farm workers at the park there in Delano, California, and they were all shouting, "Kennedy for president, Kennedy for president." It was a very stirring moment. And of course, the reason that we were there at the park is because Cesar was ending his 25-day water-only fast. And by the way, I had been working in New York City on the boycott. And so I flew out back to California just a few days before Cesar ended his fast. And I am the one that had been entrusted to make sure you get Bobby Kennedy to come when Caesar ends his fast. And that was my job in New York. And Senator Kennedy had been supporting us. He had helped, had done fundraisers for the farm workers, so he had been a great supporter before he came.
So a lot is happening, right? We have the strike, which starts in 1965 and lasts 5 years. And when you started, you don't know how long it's going to last.
Mm-hmm.
And a little after the strike, the boycott starts as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the boycott involves consumers around the nation, right?
Right.
And beyond that, beyond the nation too, it became an international thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, can you tell me about that moment?
This was right in the middle of the boycott when this picture was taken. And by the way, the other gentleman there, Andy Imitan, was also one of the Filipino vice presidents of the our United Farm Workers Organizing Committee. And when we finally had the charter from the AFL-CIO and just became United Farm Workers, both Larry and Larry Ilong and Andy Imitan were part of the list of the vice presidents. So of course we couldn't win the strike because there were so many. They were bringing in strike breakers. We're so close to Mexico that they could just bring in people to break the strike almost overnight. So it wasn't until actually we had an attorney that was one of our volunteer attorneys. And he's still alive today. His name is Stu Weinberg. He's an attorney in San Francisco. And he had been visiting us and volunteering. And we were all meeting together. There was a small group of us, and we were saying, what are we going to do? We're not going to be able to win this strike. There's an endless supply of strike breakers that they can bring in. And then he said to us, have you ever thought of starting a boycott? And we said, well, okay, explain that. And this is when they were having they had just had the bus boycott in Montgomery, when all of the Black folk decided not to ride the buses because they were making them, stay at the back of the bus. And so they just decided not to ride the buses. And I think that boycott went on for over a year, but they finally won. And so we thought, okay, we'll try that. We'll do a boycott. And then some of our young volunteers, they started the first boycott that we had was against one of our companies that was on strike called Shenley, which it was a liquor company, but they had a vineyard there in Delano. And so our young volunteers, and actually some of them hitchhiked all the way to go back east to St. Louis, and they went to New York City, and they started this boycott against Shenley, and it was successful. So then, we boycotted several of the wine companies, and we got a few wine contracts. But then we had the whole grape industry, and so there were more strikes, and so we said, we have to strike the grape industry, and so we started the grape boycott. And I was in New York City, heading up that boycott when Bobby Kennedy came to Delano. But it was successful because we were able to get 17 million Americans not to eat grapes or not to buy grapes. And that is what brought the growers to the table.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes, it was very much in the news. One of the fascinating things about doing research on this period was just reading all the press on the boycott and realizing what sort of economic pressure consumers and farm workers were putting around the nation, and how effective it was as a political tool, right? Really fascinating. Another fascinating thing is the reach of that boycott. I found, for example, little pins supporting the boycott and photographs from Quebec in Canada, or found pins supporting the boycott in Arabic. And so you realize that this was a movement that counted with incredible international and multicultural support.
Dr. Rosales just put in the chat that this was probably the most significant boycott that had been held in the United States of America. But I guess the significant thing about the boycott is that the farm workers themselves are the ones that went out to the cities. And if we have a moment, if I could just tell a story of one of our boycotters. Now, he's still alive today. He lives in Chicago, but he was completely illiterate, could not read. He could not read or write English. He could speak Spanish, couldn't read or write in Spanish either. And when Cesar was asking for volunteers to go, the farm workers to volunteer to go on the boycott, and he put the names of the cities on, he had this a big butcher paper. I guess we don't call it butcher paper anymore. We call it the notepad on the wall. And he put down Boston. Who wants to go to Boston? And Marcos thought he had said Barstow. And he had a girlfriend in Barstow. So he held up his hand that he was going to go to Barstow. Little did he know they put him on a plane and he ended up in Boston. And so here he is in Cambridge, we have Yale University and you have Harvard and Boston University and all of these great universities. And this man who could not read or write was sent there for the boycott. The wonderful lesson about Marcos Munoz is that he was the first one to clean the city of Boston of grapes and to the whole state of Massachusetts of grapes. And how did he do it? He would get the students from Yale and Harvard to do his leaflets, to do his picket lines, because he couldn't read or write. So they had to do all the work for him. And in fact, people know Hugo Morales, who was the head of the Radio Bilingüe. He was one of the people that Marcos organized to come to his picket lines.
What an amazing story. Wow. And so that boycott brought growers to the table. And here you are negotiating contracts. You became the main contract negotiator for the union. I think I remember reading that by 1972, you had negotiated something like 100 contracts. And you were very often the only woman at the table and in the room. The union loved you because you were relentless and you persisted in your demands and you're an incredible negotiator. But the growers called you the Dragon Lady. Can you talk about that? What was it like to be that person representing the union and negotiating the contracts?
Well, I think the reason they call me that is because I think sometimes we were able to get such good contracts for the workers with a pension plan and a medical plan and a check off with the credit union, get personal time off of them because many of them lived in Mexico and would come up to work, in the different places that they went. But literally, I always say I was like the interpreter for the workers. Like I'm looking at this table right here in the picture, and these men were so smart, so intelligent. And this was a lettuce crew here. And they had to divide what they earned between the loaders and the swampers and the cutters and the packers and the staplers of the lettuce boxes, because this is the ground lettuce that they cut. And they were they were such a genius in their mathematics. And I literally pretty much just translated for them. We would meet separately and then we would come to the table and give our proposals to the growers. But it was great. And I always just admire the intelligence of all of the farm workers. Many of them never have any kind of formal education, but that doesn't mean that they don't know what they're doing. They are very, very intelligent. I think with the gentleman who was next to at the front table here, I think he went on, his name was Jose Morales. He went on into Baja California afterwards, and I think he became a public official there.
And I also read, and I think we have talked about how you sometimes would bring into these negotiating meetings your children, and you would, every now and then when it was necessary, take a break to feed them or to just give them some attention. And that also brought another dimension into the meeting, very human, right?
Well, yes, I would have to take a nursing break. And that was for Camila, for my daughter Camila.
That's amazing. And I can imagine just how that could throw some people off, what do you mean that didn't used to happen when it was only men here, right? But suddenly you have a woman at the table and you have to make sure that the family is provided for, right?
And there's a great joke that one of my assistants who would go with me to negotiations said that when I reached into my case to pull out a proposal that I was going to put on the table, I reached out a pamper instead.
That's so funny. Okay, so this is another photograph that I like very much because if you've seen the images I've shown until now, very often you are you're we see you there among many among a mainly male population, either the growers or the farm workers themselves.
Mhm.
But something that you brought to the table, and you've said also that Helen Chavez also brought to the table, was your presence as women in the movement,
Mhm.
and that that was important to mobilize
Mhm.
women who were also farm workers and mothers, and but who saw themselves more having a rather domestic role. But you proposed another model to them. Can you talk about that?
Well, actually, about half of the workforce in the grapes are women. About half of the workforce in the grapes are women. In the lettuce industry, they used to have the women on the machines. And and women were always in the forefront, as they are in many, many struggles. Women are always in the forefront of the struggle. Sometimes where the women get lost, as they did actually in our union also, when it came down to the taking the positions on the executive board, et cetera. And that's where the women got lost. In the United Farm Workers, women ran they ran the clinics, they ran different field offices, and they were very, very present in terms of leadership, but just short of the executive board. And it's so funny because when I remember once somebody asking Caesar, why do you have so many women in leadership here? And he said, because they do the work. He had a very short answer for that. But in the prior picture that we showed about the negotiating committee from Sun Harvest and the leaders of that organization, the women that were working on the machines, that they weren't getting as good a wages as the lettuce cutters were. And so the lettuce cutters went out on strike so that the women could get more wages for their contract. And they did it on Labor Day, which is really amazing. And you know what? They ran the whole strike themselves. We didn't have to send any of our union staff to, and even myself, I remember, I think they had the Olympics or something that was going on at the same time. And they just ran the whole strike themselves, but we just had such incredible leadership.
That's really wonderful and fascinating, that to hear that it's really a misconception that women were not so present in the leadership positions. They were.
Mhm.
Mhm. And so another dimension that I would like to talk about is the role of art in the farm workers movement. And this is really, this is one of my favorite portraits at the portrait gallery. And I had the great pleasure of acquiring it for the museum. And this particular one is dedicated by Dolores to Barbara Carrasco, who made the silk screen honoring Dolores. She wanted to create an iconic image of her. But also, I really encourage you to look at the virtual tour for the exhibition, because this is an area that we really expanded in the show. And there are photographs of the Teatro Campesino, directed by Luis Valdez. There are photographs, there are other artworks reproduced, notably by Esther Hernandez, very iconic works, and by Javier Viramontes. And there were so many artists who made artwork in support of the farm workers. Can you talk about that relationship between the arts and the movement?
Yeah, the art was very important. And in fact, Barbara Carrasco, when she was just a young artist, and she would bring all of these other artists from Los Angeles, and many of them became very, very famous artists. And they would paint these huge, huge murals on canvas and they would do this for our conventions. And of course, we had our conventions like at the Selland Arena in Fresno, or here in Bakersfield at the big auditorium. So there were huge banners of murals that they painted. And so the artists were very much part of the farm worker movement. And there were many posters that came out during that time also. The posters that were to motivate the workers and to affirm them and recognize them. And of course, Teatro Campesino was very important to us, Luis Valdez, because they would do during the grape strike, which lasted for, the strike lasted for 5 years. And you can imagine that was a long time, and people would get kind of discouraged, and but Luis Valdez with Teatro Campesino kept the spirits of the farm workers up, and they would do a different kind of theater skit, and they would be really funny and make everybody laugh. And so there have been a lot of spin-offs from the Teatro Campesino, and other groups have formed their own guerrilla theater. They might call it El Teatro de la Gente, a theater of the people. And so, and of course, many songs that were written, Huelga en General, the strike is going to, there are songs about the children in the movement. And of course, and then Danny Valdez, Luis's brother, was also a very big part of the movement, and doing songs and theater and stuff like that. And I think it's important for that, for always to think about, because movement work is very difficult and very hard. So, but we have art and we have music and theater, and that really, it gives people the animo, so that they can keep on going. And because we know that the road to social justice is a very long road, and we don't want to get tired, and we can get a little bit tired, but when we have the music and the art and the theater that lifts our spirits, it gives us the energy to keep on going.
Right. And that's something that you often mention too when people ask you what are the things you enjoy, right? You talk about how much you love jazz, for example, and how that is, going to a jazz concert is such a release.
Oh, and Bakersfield College, by the way, where this exhibition is at right now, has one of the best teachers, jazz teachers, and the students. They have a wonderful jazz program there at Bakersfield College. And we have, once we get up over the pandemic, we have a jazz workshop, and many of the students from the Bakersfield College come and they play at that jazz workshop. I can hardly wait till we can all be together again and get our jazz fix back, because it's been gone for us for a long time during the pandemic.
That's wonderful. Dolores, I don't have any more images, but I want to talk about what has happened in the course of this exhibition, being up at the Portrait Gallery and then traveling through the country. It's been 6 years, and I think the country has changed significantly socially. And I wonder, what are your thoughts about that? How do you also see? Do you agree with my observation? I think when we first opened this show, there were important struggles going on in 2015, 2016. However, it did seem like a celebration of something that had happened 50 years ago, this exhibition. And I think even though there were some segments of society fighting very hard for their rights, the LGBTQ segment, for example, the LGBTQ community, the people who are in the struggle for environmental issues. There was also, I think, some sort of nostalgia that we cannot reach that kind of ferment that there was in the late 60s, and that was so much part of the movement that you and Cesar Chavez led. But we've had quite a number of struggles after 2015 and until today. And of course, we think, the one that really comes most strongly to our minds right now is the Black Lives Matter protests after the horrific death of George Floyd last year and Breonna Taylor and all the Black people who died in terrible ways, either through acts of violence from white supremacists or from acts of police violence. And I wondered what you have to say about that.
Well, I think that we see, as you just stated, that we see that there are many demonstrations that are starting in the United States, and then they're going international, beginning with the Women's March after President Trump was elected. Of course, the Me Too movement, the women's movement. Then we saw the young people from Parkland, Florida, Emma Gonzalez, when they did the marches against gun violence. And of course, as you mentioned, we have the Black Lives Matter movement that is happening right now. All of the protests, I'm sure many of the students did, because we had those marches and those protests right here in Bakersfield. I have to say that I was not able to join them because of COVID and because of my age, which I feel very, very sad about that. But we had many demonstrations and marches right here in our town here in Kern County, which is the most conservative county in the whole state of California. So we can see, especially with the devices that young people have now, with their cell phones and the computers, and then all of the social platforms that they can get on, Facebook, Instagram, et cetera, because I don't even know all of them, that you can just mobilize people so quickly. But a couple of things I just want to mention, though, kind of dialing back a little bit. The farm workers strike was so effective and so strong and we had many students that would come, like Luis Valdez, because he was a student at San Jose State when he came to Delano, and then he just stayed and didn't go back to school. By the way, he did get an honorary degree from San Jose State, but you had students from Los Angeles and from everywhere that came to volunteer with the farm workers. And what came out of that? They started having student strikes in Los Angeles. And Sal Castro, who was one of the movers and shakers of the student walkouts in Los Angeles, he gave credit to the farm workers movement. He said if the farm workers could go on strike, then the students can go on strike. And it started the whole Chicano movement. So it started in Delano and then went all over the Southwest, even as far as places like Chicago. The Chicanos, Mexican Americans were, in New Mexico and Arizona and Texas, we had this great movement of young Latinos that got involved. And then, of course, in the boycott, we were there with the Puerto Ricans, with the young lords, and they were also very effective in helping us. We worked with the Black Panthers in Oakland and actually throughout the whole United States of America. So this farm worker movement just spread everywhere. It became a really great movement. And I think that's what's happening today too, is that we do see, again, because we can get information so quickly, we can share information, educate people on the issues, and mobilize everybody, that I think we are in a very special moment right now in our United States of America with people, engaging and people being involved. There's more work to do. And by the way, we are celebrating this week that we have our first Filipino that has been appointed to a statewide position as Attorney General. And his name is Rob Banta. And guess what? His family was involved in the strike. And they actually lived at La Paz in the headquarters of the union. And it's somebody that we've known since he was a kid, and now he's the Attorney General of the state of California. And he is the first Filipino to be appointed to a statewide position here. So we are celebrating, mabuhay, we are celebrating the Filipinos that have contributed so much to our country, and that many people don't know so little about what their contributions have been to our United States of America.
Thank you. Dolores, we have many questions from the audience, but before that, I want to ask you, can you talk about the situation of farm workers now as essential workers during the pandemic?
Yeah, and to your previous question, which I quite didn't answer, I think that the fact that we have President Biden now, and that he and many others are finally recognizing the farm workers as being essential workers. And that, because they have been out there working to feed us every single day of the pandemic. We haven't stopped eating. Uh, we had to stop a lot of stuff, but didn't stop eating. And the farm workers are the ones that have been putting the food on our table every single day. And they are finally being recognized for that. In California, one of the senators from San Diego, Ben Wessel, has introduced a farm worker day. So we have a Cesar Chavez holiday. We have a day of recognition for Lady Eat Long, a day of recognition for myself, but this is going to be a recognition for farm workers. I'm sure it's going to pass, and I'm sure that the governor is going to sign it in the legislature. So hopefully we can all celebrate that day when farm workers are finally respected and they get the recognition, and eventually, hopefully, the wages that they deserve, living wages. Farm workers, of course, we have a minimum wage in California that is higher, probably double than that of the other states, and all farm workers are covered by the minimum wage. And then, of course, you have other farm workers that are covered by contracts that the United Farm Workers has, and those farm workers are even better off because they get higher wages above the minimum wage. And the pension plan, and things that other farm workers don't have when they don't have contracts.
Well, this has been an amazing interview, Dolores, and now we have many questions from the audience. So we can, Ronnie, do you moderate this part?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
And there was a good suggestion from the chat. Will you pull your screen down so we can see everyone a little better? And I had a couple questions emailed to me this week. And if I can start with Jorge Ramos, he's a grad student at Eastern Michigan University. He wanted me to ask you, Dolores, what does it mean to be a leader?
A leader is someone that is of service to the community and that empowers other people. So a leader is not somebody that empowers themselves, but that is always making other people strong and, helping other people with their issues and their problems, but empowering them so that they can take care of their issues and their problems. So sometimes as quote unquote leaders, we're like at the front of the march, but if you don't have people behind you, there's no march, okay? So we always have to remember that. So how many people have we helped? How many people have we developed into leaders? That is the gauge of a leader. How much have you done for your community, not how much have you done for yourself? I think Cesar Chavez is a perfect model of that because Cesar, when he died, his earnings were $6,000. $6,000, okay? And people can still go to La Paz, which is, of course, only 30 miles from Bakersfield here. And for the people that are here from Kern County, it's up there in Keene, California. Cesar's mansion. The growers used to put out these leaflets that say, Cesar Chavez has a mansion. And when you see Cesar's very modest 2-bedroom house that is still there, because La Paz, the headquarters of the union in Keene, California, which is between Bakersfield and Tehachapi on Highway 58, and they will see what it's now. With President Obama, they made it part of the National Park Service. Okay, so so they can see the Cesar's mansion, which is a modest 2-bedroom home.
Very humble of you. We're amongst another leader as well. Carolyn Brandenburg, who's BC faculty in the sociology department, asked, how do you find the strength or mental fortitude to continue even when faced with resistance?
Well, we know that one thing that we know for sure, if we don't do the work, it's not going to happen, okay? And we know we still have a lot of work to do out there. We're trying to challenge racial discrimination, women's reproductive rights that are in other states, not California, trying to be taken away from them. We have many homophobic people in our society, And so we have to end all of these issues of people that are climate change deniers. And our job, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, that racism is a sickness. And so we have to be the healers, and we have to go out there and, educate people and organize them so that they will be caught in those types of philosophies of hatred, hating other people because of the way that they look, or because they're different color, or because of a different sex, etc. So that is our job as here on this earth. We have to leave this world in a better place than when we got here. We think, and I think for young people, we think, oh, I'm going to be here a long time. No, time goes really fast. Okay, so we want to leave this place when we were born here, but when we leave it, we want to leave it better than when we got here. And it's a responsibility that we all have. We showed a picture of Robert Kennedy, and just minutes before he was killed, before he was assassinated, he said, we have responsibilities and obligations to our fellow citizens. All of us have those responsibilities, and we have to think about that. And so again, how can we help people that are in need, people that need support? We have to do it. And by the way, I just want to throw it out there right now that we have 3 important measures right now in the US Senate. One of them is to protect voting rights, because in other states, and I know we have people from other states on this, there are states where they are trying to suppress people's voting rights or take them away entirely. So that's, and that is called For the People Act, and it's in the Senate, the US Senate. There's another one, of course, on immigration reform. And again, we want to ask people, please write your senator. And if you have relatives in other states, call them and ask them, please email your senators to give the vote for immigration reform. And another one that is really special to me is the Equal Rights Amendment. that is also in the US Senate. And if the Senate makes it possible to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment, we can finally put it as part of the Constitution of the United States of America that men and women are equal. Okay, we can make it happen in this year, but we've got to get those senators to vote for it. So if people, we have friends and relatives in other states outside of California, call them, email them, and tell them, please write your senator to support S1 For the People Act on voting, immigration reform, and the Equal Rights Amendment. And there is a website for the Equal Rights Amendment that I want to share. It's really easy. It's ERAYES2021.org. ERAYES2021.org. So that's a website for the Coalition for the Equal Rights Amendment.
Thank you. We'll try to get that in the chat as well. But thank you. Such important work being done. One for Taina, real quick. Taina, what are your thoughts on the future of the Smithsonian Latino Museum, and how might Dolores Astoria and the farm workers movement fit into the future of that museum?
Well, I'm absolutely happy and thrilled that finally the museum, the measure for a museum of the American Latino has been approved. We know it's a process that will take some time to complete. However, it's a very exciting development, and the story of Latino people in the country is absolutely essential to telling US history. We have a relationship to this country we call the United States of America that extends beyond, for centuries, and really even beyond the arrival of the pilgrims, right? And so I think it's very important to remember that the building blocks of Latino identity have been part of this northern part of the continent for centuries, that also the US has relationships to other parts of the world through its colonial action, including Puerto Rico and Guam, for example. And so it's absolutely important to incorporate those stories into the broader narrative of American history. And it's a very important symbol to have a museum dedicated to the story of US Latinos, of Latinx people, because we're fundamental to the country, because we have a longstanding presence. There are many recent arrivals, but there are also many people who never crossed the border. The border crossed them. And the story of the farm workers movement led by Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta is fundamental to that, to those contributions that Latinos have made to the country. It was absolutely revolutionary what they brought to the story of labor rights and of human rights. And I am very excited about seeing that as part of the broader narrative of our cultural, social, and political contributions to the country.
Yes, so exciting.
I'm glad that you mentioned Puerto Rico because there's a lot of conversation about the Mexican farm workers and the Filipino farm workers, but it was the Puerto Rican farm workers that actually taught us how to picket. There were a large number of Puerto Rican that were brought in from the island to work in the farms. One of the farms was the Jack Pandle Ranch. That was completely, all of the workforce were Puerto Ricans. And when we first started picketing, we would go out there, we'd have one person in a big field, you know, our fields are huge. And of course they were being run down by the growers were trying to run them down. They would get assaulted. And the Puerto Ricans said, no, that's not the way you do it, okay? You have to all come together and do a car caravan and all go together to one field, or never go out there by yourselves. So there was an incredible amount of leadership. And talking about the Latino Museum, and I love Taina's name, because when I hear of her name, I remember that when the conquerors came to the islands of Puerto Rico, they killed many of the natives, right? And they were Taino Indians, is that right? Yeah, they were Tainos and the Arawaks, and they murdered them. They had hunting parties, you know? And this is a lot of the history that people don't know about the abuses that have been, you know, directed at our Latino community, so in our indigenous community. So it's really, really important that that history and that knowledge, you know, be documented and have places where it can be shown. So, and you know, also the abuses of the people against the Central American people that have been brought here to the United States. So it's important that that Latino Museum be built. And I think that some of the funding may have been in this last stimulus package, right, for the Latino Museum. I think there may have been some funding there. But now that we have a new president, I think there will be more more support to build that Latino Museum. It needs to happen. There was a question in the chat about faith, and that was a very big part of the farm worker movement. In fact, when we had that march to Sacramento, and they elected the captain for the march, and he was a very loud-spoken person, but then he said, "I don't want to carry the Virgin of Guadalupe," and so the strikers demoted him. They took him off as captain and they voted somebody else to carry the banner that you saw in that march picture. And so I think faith played a big role. We used to have these huge masses where Caesar would ask everybody to take communion, and he would tell the priest, you know, no, unless somebody here killed somebody, you know, then you know, just forgive their sins so that they can be able to take communion. But it was and then of course Caesar, you know, with his 25-day fast that he did, you know, the first one in Delano, the second one in Arizona, and of course the last one that he did was also in Delano, California. And so Caesar really displayed, you know, his, and he was not, he kind of criticized people that would just think that you can solve everything just by praying. No, he said, you've got to take action, you know, so, and you had to have faith, because when you're in a very hard struggle, like the one that we were in, you can't survive unless you have faith. Now, you know, faith, religious faith in some respects, but also faith in yourself and faith in the people that you're working with. So it's a very strong component of it. We know as we go forward that when we think of organized religion, we can agree with the Catholic Church when it comes to working on immigration issues. we can't agree with them when it comes to gay rights or women's reproductive rights. Okay, that's where we kind of part the ways.
Thank you. And I apologize to those of you with questions hanging out. I know we're not going to have time to get to all of these. But let me ask you one more from Susanna Hernandez. She said, as a daughter of a migrant farm worker, I want to thank Dolores for her incredible work. It is an honor to hear her speak today. She said, as some populations of migrant workers become older, there has been a decline in agricultural workforce. How does the UFW, and I think probably broader organization, plan to approach new generations and new migrant populations?
Well, I don't think there's ever a shortage of farm workers because it's kind of an entry-level job. Although I do want to say that farm workers, it is a professional job. People should never look down or disparage farm workers because that the work that they do is very important. And if people that haven't done farm worker, you want to go out there for a couple of days, you'd find that you have to be almost you have to be as fit as an athlete to be to do the farm worker. And farm workers really care about what they do. They care about the plants, you know. So it's a lot of people just disparage and look down on farm workers, but they shouldn't. It is, as we said before, they're feeding us every day. Can you think of anything more important than that? I used to have this joke that I would tell students, and my son Emilio Huerta, who's an attorney, didn't really like it, but I would say, if you had to go on a deserted island somewhere and you could only take one person with you, who would you take, an attorney or a farm worker? I think the answer is pretty clear. You would take a farm worker. But so I think that people should never feel that somehow they are, you know, putting themselves down if they go out into the field to do farm work. In fact, one of the young musicians there from Bakersfield College, you know, he came up to me, he says, Señora Huerta, I want you to know that I'm still doing farm work, okay? He's going to college, but he's still doing farm work. So people should never look down on farm work as an occupation, as farm work as an occupation.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to thank you both. This has been such an honor. And I put a link in the chat to the Jones Gallery website. Our virtual tour is live, so I encourage you to go and check that out, walk through, enjoy the wonderful work and the display honoring Ms. Huerta's life. We're going to close, if Andrew has it ready, with a closing video. But thank you again. This has been.
Could I just have a word before we close? I just want to.
Absolutely, please do.
I just want to mention that Barbara Carrasco, who's made that portrait that is available at the Dolores Huerta Foundation. And if you want to know more about our foundation, we're located in Bakersfield. Right now, everybody is not working out of the office. We're all working at home. But you can get to our website at doloreshuerta.org. doloreshuerta.org. And also there was a movie, documentary made about my work with the farm workers, and it's called Dolores, very simply. They did show it at the college once, and maybe they'll show it again, but you can look it up on YouTube or on PBS on Independent Lens. And there's a lot of the footage about the strikes and the boycott and many of the subjects that we've been talking about here today. Okay. So I also want to say this to the students, because every time I speak, I always end with this chant. And what I do is I ask you, and I know we probably can't unmute everybody, but the one thing I do want you to remember, and the question that I always ask is, who's got the power? And the answer is, we've got the power. And when we say, what kind of power? We say people power, okay? And we can never, never forget that, especially now when all of us have to be engaged, because we have to save our democracy of the United States of America. And we can't do that unless each and every one of us, that we, you know, get involved, that we go out there and we vote. And if we can't vote, get other people to vote. Okay, so don't forget that, get involved, you know, volunteer. Many organizations need volunteers. And yes, we need your help. So si se puede, we can make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dolores. Thank you, Smithsonian Institution, for organizing this. Dr. Caragol, Maria, of course, Ronnie Rest, and the Bakersfield Jones Gallery. And I want to thank you all for allowing us to fold this into the Jess Nieto Memorial Conference. I know Dolores knew Jess back in the day. He organized with the UFW and was a supporter of Cesar and Dolores's work. And we just wanted to honor him this week, and it was great that we were able to work this in and with it. So I have a closing video here from Octavio Barajas, who is a professor of ethnic studies at College of the Sequoias. And he's the originator of the Jess Nieto Memorial Conference 3 years ago at BC. But before that, I just want to invite our attendees to a speaking engagement this evening with the author Helena Maria Veramontes. She is a Cornell professor of creative writing, and she'll be here at 5:30 on Zoom with the talk, The Environs of Poverty, Cages, Prisons, and Detention Centers. And that's at 5:30. I put the link in the chat. So with that, I will share Octavio's video. And again, thank you, Dolores. Thank you, Dr. Caragol, and thank you, Maria, for helping us out with all this. It was awesome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Octavio Barajas. I'm a professor of ethnic studies at the College of Sequoias in Visalia, California. And I'm also a co-founder of Kern County Educators for Ethnic Studies, along with my colleague Belen Carrasco. And I am president of La Sociedad Juárez, Mutualista Mexicana, here in Bakersfield. On behalf of the conference organizers, I would like to thank you all for your participation, support, and attending the various talks that we've had throughout this week for the 3rd annual Jess Nieto conference. So we've had such an exciting time, such important and rich conversation that's been taking place throughout the series of pláticas that have been organized as part of this year's conference. Some highlights include students who've been involved in moderating many of the discussions that have been taking place throughout the week. And highlights also include Jael Rivera, who was a recipient of the Hispanic and Native American Student Scholarship. And so also goes by Nino, who is an active participant and leader of Azteca, Danza Azteca, Mexica in Bakersfield. Also our student dreamers, Bakersfield College Dreamers from the Lupe organization, and also Latinas Unidas, who were able to share their experiences in this conference. Also, it's also important to state the focus of this year of so many participants that were able to discuss the contributions and include the voices and experiences of farm workers here in the Central Valley. Very important to state that not only did we get a chance to hear from many elders, such as Roberto Bustos El Capitan, who was part of that historic walk from Delano to Sacramento. We also got to hear from Arturo Rodriguez and Teresa Romero, and even son of Cesar Chavez, Paul Chavez. And we are just honored to actually have the opportunity to hear from Dolores Huerta, a local living legend who recently had a resolution passed recognizing Dolores Huerta Day by the Bakersfield City School District Board of Trustees. So it's just amazing to see this kind of progress being done so that future students in the BCSD will be able to understand the legacy of Dolores Huerta. And so also special thanks to Dr. Tiana Caragol, Smithsonian Curator, Revolución in the Fields. And so these are just some of so many contributions and also contributions discussing the issue of public health and COVID-19 in our communities here in Central California with California Ag Root Stories, the Central Valley Health Policy Institute, and South Kern Sol, and other members who are part of that panel to discuss these very important, serious issues of our community. And so tomorrow, Friday, from 10:30 to 12, we will have Dr. Eladio Bobadilla discuss We're Still Here, his work of doing research in Central California. Dr. Bobadilla is from Central California, from the Delano area, and is a university professor at the University of Kentucky. So we're just, again, it continues, and may it continue for the subsequent year for the 4th annual Jess Nieto Conference. Again, thank you all for your participation, your contributions and support, and we look forward to having you in the future as well. So having said that, me despido por lo pronto, and may you all have a wonderful evening. And thanks again for your support.
Thank you, Dolores.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank
Hasta
you.
pronto, Dolores.
Thank you, Maria. Hope to see you,
Sí.
hope to see you soon. Okay.
Yes.
Mariachi.
Okay. Yeah. We
Gracias.
forgot to thank the mariachi. Definitely.
Janie Flores from the BCSD Migrant Education Program, Region 21. They donated their time and they went to Jastrow Park on Truxton Avenue and recorded in the little auditorium there.
Oh, nice.
So very generous. Everyone that's been participating has been very generous with their time, and it's been a really wonderful week here at BC. And we still have tonight and tomorrow morning to go too.
Yeah, and I think we kind of have to do a little bit more publicity, because I know we had we had problems knowing when the exhibition was going to start, because I know a lot of the there's a lot of the children of farm workers that live here in Bakersfield, and even those that would come from, I mean, here we are where it all happened. And when we showed this exhibition in Stockton, we had a couple of thousand people that showed up to see the exhibit, you know. And so we want the same thing to happen here. And I know people can't maybe do it in person, but we definitely should promote it so that people can see it virtually.
Yes,
Absolutely.
we are doing that on all fronts. And also I put a comment about the app, which is Your Voice. Inside the virtual tour is the beautiful, beautiful virtual tour, and your voice is in it. And thanks to Ronnie, Andrew, Oliver, and all the Jeffrey, who've been part of these projects from Bakersfield. Great partnership.
Mhm.
And it will last for more than a year, Dolores. It will be there
Here?
for a year. The
And
virtual tour.
Virtually.
The virtual
Oh,
tour.
Virtual tour.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we'll be out of the pandemic, and then maybe we can have another event like this one. And maybe I think we should. I'm thinking we should be out of the pandemic by September. You know, if not earlier, then we can
hope.
do a whole other event, and then we can maybe invite some of the children of some of the farmers, and some of the strikers are still alive, by the way. And in our foundation, because we do a lot of work in Arvin and Lamont, you know, we have the veteranos, we call them, you know, de la huelga. In fact, I was just in fact at a funeral, and we had 2 or 3 of the. One of them was actually from Fresno, that had been on the strike, another woman who had worked at the Georgia Farms when that existed, you know, that was in the strike. So we have a lot of the veteranos that are still around, and we'd love to invite them to come. I think they would be thrilled. Because
Dolores, one thing that I would add too, as far as the exhibit goes here at BC, I'd encourage you to go and check it out, because we have students from BC who have done recordings reacting to some of the content and materials in there. So if you haven't seen that yet, it's really, just adds another element, another layer.
I totally agree. Testimonials from students and faculty that are part of the virtual tour. Dolores, the physical exhibition will travel to Park City, Utah, the Park City History Museum in Utah. The end of the show, the physical show at the gallery is April 25th. But the virtual tour will be indefinite. And hopefully when the pandemic ends and people can gather, maybe an auditorium where we can show the virtual tour and other things. And Diane and I are very sad that we cannot go to Bakersfield at this time, but we hope very soon we will be able to see you and hug you personally.
Yeah, well, every place that the tour has been, you know, it's been so. It's Sacramento, you know, where it was there, and that's New Mexico. They had a virtual, as you know, they had this virtual thing there in Las Cruces, New Mexico, and so And where was it that we went to? Was it Nebraska?
Nebraska
In
also.
Nebraska, I mean, and they had so many people that came to Nebraska to see the tour. So
Yes.
every place that we've been with the tour, of course, now we
Yes.
can't be there physically, but yeah, and I just hope that, you know, people that are close by. So right now it's going to be just a virtual tour. It's going to be on for a year here in Bakersfield College. So we don't have the physical tour here, huh? Just a virtual.
The
Correct, unfortunately.
yeah, the physical exhibit is there until April 25th.
Yeah.
And with your collection here at the college,
Mhm.
Jones Art Gallery, and I hope that at some point you can come in with authorities that will allow you to go in with some special people from the college.
I would love to do that. And I think, you know, as people are getting, and by the way, they're having the vaccination right here at Bakersfield College right now, right? It's starting, is it
Right.
this weekend? They're going to be doing the vaccinations here. So as more people get vaccinated, yeah, we can definitely do that. I would love to do that. Because I just wish that more of this, like the striker families, because this would mean so much to them if they could, you know, see, and their kids, you know, if they could see this, because they know. In fact, one of the women that I was with, it was a rosary that I was attending the other day, and she told me that when she was just a kid, and her mother had brought her to the picket line, and then they were trying to show Cesar some place that he should be at or take the pickets to, and she was Caesar's guide. and she was just a young kid, you know, but she remembers that, and that's of course something that she's really proud of, that she could actually be a guide for Caesar. Yeah.
And also, I wanted to share that today we got confirmation
Mhm.
that we have the Arizona State Museum.
Oh, wow.
In
Oh,
Phoenix.
that's going to be important too.
That's right. That's right. So let's hope that then we will be all together. And
Yeah.
maybe, who knows, if we can, at the end of the tour, it can come back, the exhibit can come back to Bakersfield.
Yes. Yeah, let's hope we have to do that and have to do a big celebration. Hopefully I'm
That's right.
still around when that happens. Okay.
Of course you will. Of course you will.
And-
Yes.
And
I
I'll tell you,
know Taina has to go, but we love you, Dolores.
I love
Thank
you
you,
too.
Andrew.
I love
Thank you, Ronnie.
you.
Thank you, Jeffrey and Oliver.
I just want to tell you that my hair was as long as yours. I just had it cut a couple of weeks ago.
You look beautiful.
Yeah, with the pandemic, it kept growing and growing and growing.
Yes.
Thank you.
I love you guys.
Here.
Thank you, everyone.
To Isela and Deborah for being our great captioners. Thank you for your patience and all the help, Andrew, today, and Ronnie, and everybody behind the scenes. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. And
Thank you.
Dolores,
Mhm.
hasta pronto.
Hasta pronto.
Gracias, Taina.
So good to see you both. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all.